All right, kia ora. Ricardo here, and this is the video for CTEC 810.W1 Week 1, Section 2, S2. So we're going to talk here briefly about what is research and what are research questions. Every time in the course where you see the acronym RQ, I'm using it just as a shorthand for research questions. Okay. All right, very important is that you remember or that you keep in mind that there is the postgraduate handbook, PG handbook of AUT, the Auckland University of Technology. It is very important because this document, this book that is published every year contains all the regulations and all the terms that are relevant for students doing a postgraduate program of any type or any level in the university, in any school. So all the creative technologies programs, like other programs in the university, are regulated by this handbook. So this is a very important thing for you to have at hand and to keep in mind and to consult. Maybe you don't have to read it from beginning to end, but keep it at hand so that you can consult some particular processes. Every doubt you have, you go first to the PG handbook. And whenever I mention the course that I'm taking showing you stuff from the PG handbook, this is what I mean by it, and the link is there. All right, so the word research is an interesting word. We use it in an everyday language, but we use it for different purposes and with different meanings, depending on different situations. Right? Even within an academic context, even the university uses research in different ways. So I'm going to show you here the graduate profile of PhD programs, Doctor of Philosophy programs in AUT, and the master's level. So every PhD and every master's program should comply with these characteristics. So I'm showing them to you highlighted in different colors. Obviously, I removed the grammar just to make this more visible in a presentation like this. Have a look at that. If you need to pause the video, I won't read it out loud. If you need to pause the video, pause it now. Read some of these aspects, and we can continue after that. All right, so as you can see, the word research shows up in different places when we are defining what a PhD, what a person with a PhD should be capable of doing. Advanced research, mastery of body of knowledge, original contribution, and the ethical dimensions, for instance, right? When we go to the master's program, in the next slide, again, if you need to pause this and go through it in your own time, do it, and we can comment it after you read it. Okay, so for the master's, you see the word research shows up in a couple of places, and also the word practice. I think that is interesting. Professional practice. We're going to talk a lot more about the connection between research and practice later on. But it seems, sometimes it seems when you read the PhD and the master's that it's almost the same because they both talk about research. I think the most important distinction we need to make here is that a PhD is expected to perform research that leads to an original contribution to the field, so adds knowledge to a field, to a community of researchers. Whereas the masters are not required to contribute new knowledge. It's considered usually mainly a stage where you learn the craft of research that then you can apply later on, either in your professional life or in your academic life. But this is kind of like the difference. Sometimes people misunderstand a master's as a mini PhD or a PhD as a kind of like mega masters, but they are different in nature. They are not only different in length, but they are different in nature. So master's research, you can perfectly conduct some replication studies. You can perfectly do something that someone else has done before. That's where the word original comes in the PhD. In the PhD, you are not. That's not enough. In a PhD, you do have to do something that no one has done before, right? To address a question that no one has asked before, or address a question that many people have asked before, but they haven't addressed it in the way that you are addressing it in the PhD. So that's the main difference between PhD and master's. But let's go a little bit more fundamental and do kind of like the typical exercise of going to the dictionary. And we can see here the Cambridge Dictionary and the American Dictionary here. And research is obviously both a verb and a noun. As a verb, it's defined as to study a subject in detail, especially in order to discover new information or reach a new understanding. So be careful, pay attention to those words. Study something in detail, especially to discover new information or reach a new understanding. All right? So you're not only just studying something that you're interested, something that everyone else has looked at in detail and has discovered new information, or has discovered information is already there, but you are doing it to reach new information, to produce a new understanding. All right? So not just for your personal kind of like learning, but as a collective learning activity. As a noun is also the output of that process, so a detailed study of a subject in order to discover information or achieve a new understanding of it. So pretty similar to the other one. Then we also have it as a synonym to examine something very, very carefully. And I think the very carefully is very interesting there. And some other definitions of research as a noun, the systematic investigation, I think that's really important, that word, systematic investigation, into and study of materials and sources in order to establish facts and reach new conclusions. Again, that novelty aspect there. And the verb is to investigate systematically. So let's pay attention to those keywords right there. To research is to study, to examine carefully, systematically, in detail, to reach new understandings and new conclusions. So it's not just enough to study something if it's not research if it's not done carefully, systematically, and in detail. And it's also not research if it doesn't produce new understandings or new conclusions. Okay. I chose just some other ways of defining the term. So there are some translations into different languages. If you happen to speak one or more of those languages, we can already start talking about that in the forum, what you think about the word research in your language, and what is your understanding, not only in English, but in your own or in another language. What is your thinking about research in that particular language? I'm also conducting here, so I'm sharing with you a visual search. So looking at Google Images and just putting the word research and saying, that's always interesting to define something without words, to define it with images, because it gives you an idea of what are kind of like the cliches or the stereotypes or the visual manifestations of the word research. It's always interesting what comes up. As you can see, there are a lot of stereotypes or a lot of collective imaginations about scientific research, especially lab research. So the white coat and the microscope, the glasses. But it's interesting. There are other images outside of that kind of like stereotypical. If you look at Google Ngram Viewer. Ngram Viewer is an analysis of basically all the books published in the English language from the 1800s to today. So the last couple of 100 years. And this is just a search of the word research, and you can see how it takes off after approximately 100 years ago. Before that, the word wasn't in use as much. So interesting, sort of like historical relevance of the word research. Okay, so what does this image mean? I want you to think of research at this point as an area of study, as we said, to study something systematically. And for that kind of like systematic and in detail study, we're going to need tools. We can't just look at something and say that we're studying it. We very likely need tools, either material tools or conceptual tools, to look at something in detail and look at it systematically, right? So we have here tools that are used to work in a mouth, right? So these are tools that dentists use around the world to fix any problems that are, or most problems with teeth and gums and things around your mouth, right? So it makes perfect sense that in order to help someone to fix something that is wrong with a tooth, that you would use this type of tools to work. You can't do it by hand, you need to do it in more detail, professionally, reliably, so you're going to use tools, right? But now what is important is that not all tools are appropriate to fix other types of problems. So if your problem is not in your mouth, if you have a health issue not in your mouth, but in your eye, these tools are not relevant, right? There is very little you can do with those tools, and probably very painful if you wanted to fix a problem in your eye rather than your mouth. So why do I use this kind of like very simple explanation is because if you move this into like more sophisticated thinking, we need a variety of tools, in this case research methods. We need a variety of tools, some of them very specialized, some of them are more general, but we need a variety of tools because we are looking at very different problems in very different places. So just like you would try and help someone with a problem in their eye or a problem in their mouth, you would pick a different tool. This doesn't mean that if you see someone using this tool, that you can tell immediately if they are doing it right or wrong. The only way you can tell is if you can see someone using this tool for this area of your body, right? If you go to the dentist and the person grabs one of these tools to work on your mouth, you're like, okay, they know what they're doing. If you go to the eye doctor and they take one of these tools in their hands, you are going to be like, yeah, no, this person probably doesn't know what they are doing. So again, this is very basic, but this is relevant because in research, in academic research, a lot of the time we get lost in commenting and criticizing research methods that we're not familiar with because we say, oh no, that's not a good research method. So I hope with this simple case you realize that the question would be, what do you mean that's not a good research method? For what? Right? What are you looking at? Oh, it's not a good research, it's not a good tool for a health problem. Well, hold on, what do you mean? What type of health problem? Is it a health problem in your eye or is it a health problem in your mouth? So not all health problems are the same. And not all pains are the same. So if you have a pain in your eye or if you have a pain in your mouth, then you need to pick up different tools. And of course, in reality, professionals sometimes specialize in to a level to an extreme level that they end up only using a particular set of tools for what they do. And that's okay if you are a hyper specialist. You might work all day only with these tools, right? For every day of your career, this might be more than enough if all you're doing is the same kind of like type of task over and over and over. And in that case, it's perfectly reasonable to quote unquote marry your tools. You get your tools, you specialize in your tools, and they almost become part of you, right? You become really proficient at them because you use them so much. And that's it. Now, that's one option, and that's perfectly fine. But a lot of people work in research, in academic research, and especially in areas like creative technologies. So that example of someone using one tool for one, even it's not a very good example, because even if you were like a geneticist and you're working all the time with DNA molecules, even then, over years, your tools are going to evolve, they're going to improve. You might understand DNA from a different point of view, and you might bring different technology and different ways of working with DNA. But for an area like creative technologies, where problems are so diverse and so hard, and what we call wicked problems that require a broad thinking and multi or inter or transdisciplinary work, then it doesn't make a lot of sense to hyper specialize in one particular set of tools. So in that particular case, I recommend that people look at the problem first. Is it a health problem? Okay, that narrows it down. Then what type of health problem is? Does the person have a pain? Well, what is that pain? And where is the pain? And what type of pain is that? And then that's going to dictate what type of tools you are going to select and work with. So I hope that kind of like simple introduction tells you why there is no right or wrong research methods, but there is certainly right or wrong ways of using research methods. So in this particular image, it's not that the hammer is a bad tool, it's that the hammer shouldn't be used to work with this screw on this piece of wood, right? You would need a screwdriver to work properly on this particular instance, or a nail if you're going to use a hammer.